Well, a very warm welcome to the GMIS digital series under the theme of globalization towards sustainable and inclusive global value chains. In this next discussion, we're going to take a look at the workforce working through the pandemic with a focus on cocooning versus herd immunity. My name is Buckwell, and it's an absolute pleasure to be your moderator for this session. Well, during the pandemic, a number of countries around the world at some point either considered or opted for a herd immunity approach in an effort to help preserve economies from faltering. Some say that the cost of shutting down the economy for an indefinite period has more damaging consequences on its citizens than the virus itself. On the other hand, advocates for cocooning believe that a total lockdown of cities is necessary in a pandemic environment for weeks, if not months. So as we slowly emerge from total lockdown in some cities, and as we continue to fight the virus through social distancing, the current ongoing debate is whether to continue working through the pandemic in a normal office or factory setting, or to remain at home and to work remotely. So what is the new normal, or what might it look like in the near future, and how might it affect corporate resilience? Well, it's time now to find out through our esteemed panel. It's a great privilege to have with us here today Mr. Harald Kayser, who is the chairman and senior partner at PwC Europe, and also a member of the PwC Network leadership team. He closely works with his team across 6 territories of continental Europe, where driving change to be fit for the future is the focus of his strategic agenda. In his long-standing career with PwC, Harald has taken on a number of global board positions as a member of the Global Assurance Leadership Team and of the Network Operations Leadership Team, with a special focus on the industrial and automotive sectors. A very warm welcome to Mr. Harald Kayser.
Thanks, Laura, for the nice introduction.
Very much looking forward to your views on this very important topic. Next up, we have Mr. Guillermo Miranda, who's the VP and head of corporate CSR at IBM, where he leads the company's responsible stewardship and social impact programs worldwide, including prioritizing investments to tackle challenges such as reinventing education for the AI digital-driven economy. Guillermo also chairs IBM's Corporate Responsibility Executive Steering Committee. Guillermo has served IBM since '97 in a number of leadership roles around the world. A very warm welcome to Guillermo Miranda.
Thank you very much. Pleasure
really fantastic to have you here. And our final panelist, we have 3 panelists for this session, is Mr. Engin Eroglu, who was a member of the European Parliament. Engin has held a number of senior political roles over his career, including state and regional chairman of the State Association of Free Voters in Hessen, Germany, as well as city councillor for the city of Schwalmstadt. He has been a member of the European Parliament for Germany since 2019, and is also a member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, as well as the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. A very warm welcome to Engin Eroglu.
Auch ich danke, herzlichen Dank für die Einladung.
Well, really fantastic to have you all here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules. I thought we'd kick things off and start off with how each of you has adapted in this current scenario. What have you been doing in your current work environment, and what do you feel has worked best? I think we'll start off with Harald Kayser. What have you been doing over at PwC?
Yeah, thanks, Laura, for the question. Yeah. So you have to know we have 280,000 people worldwide, and this pandemic, COVID-19 crisis reached out to all of us. So we had to implement the right technology to make sure that we can work remotely from home, because the #1 principle is and was safety first for our people, people first, and protecting them as well as our clients, because many of the clients took the same measures and we had to follow. So therefore, it was key #1 was that we have the technology infrastructure to make that possible, and that we have the right collaboration tools internally but also externally to make that happen. And I have to say that went much better than expected, to be honest. And the flexibility also of our customers to share with us their technology and to work in this environment worked much better than originally expected. On the other side, it's clear that if everybody works from home, there are challenges. So your family is living there, space is not always available, and also your well-being might be different because you're missing the social contacts. So therefore, we did a lot in order, to inform our people about the current status, also to share best practices around the network, what's going well, also to try to socialize some of the events we are normally doing with staff on a virtual basis, even together with clients, where we had virtual dinners and like that, in order, to create this atmosphere of the new normal. At the same time, we have to admit that for short term this is working, but on a long term we have definitely many challenges, because if you don't know people, then it's much more difficult to come into a relationship and how to build on. At the same time, clients are also requiring for certain work that you are on premise and work there directly with them. So, and that's, I think there's not a solution for which works for everything. We have different countries with different numbers of infected people. At the same time, we have to understand that also the policies, procedures within the companies are different, and therefore we agreed on to be as flexible as possible. So if clients do want to see us, then we will make it possible with all the social distancing and protocols which are in place. If they are more keen to work remotely, then we're doing that in the best manner. And so far that's working well. However, I have to say also the COVID-19 crisis is affecting our business quite rapidly. But I think the most important thing, and that's also based on our value, that we protect our people, that we did not start a layoff program, that we showed responsibility also in light of society, and work in the best way together with clients and our staff to come through that.
Well, good to know that there is a lot of flexibility, and you have given your staff a lot of flexibility. And also, it's quite amazing how companies have been able to adapt so quickly, considering everything's happened so fast, hasn't it? So, Guillermo Miranda, what's been happening over at IBM? How have you managed to adapt? How is your company adapting to this new sort of normal?
Absolutely. Look, like our friends from PwC, health and safety of our employees, our clients, and the communities where we work always comes first. And there was a responsibility to help the local, the country health systems to flatten the curve. Most of our work can be done remote, so we embark in this global experiment to move rapidly to working from home. As a global operation, you have seen this coming from China, Korea, Singapore. So it came through Europe, US. We rapidly respond, and our people has a mentality of agility. Many years we have been working around agile methodology, so that helps. And also we did a pledge from working from home, understanding and showing empathy, because as Harald described, it's not the same. You have a family, you have homeschooling happening, not necessarily the perfect setting. So a set of rules and understandings of how we work with each other. In April, we have to make a decision about our global conference. Think, usually happens in San Francisco, 50,000 people coming, and we flip it in a matter of weeks to a virtual event. It shows some of the power of technology. Instead of 50,000 people, we have more than 150,000 people attending the global conference, but it's also showing the shortcomings of no face-to-face. As described, it's not easy to engage with somebody that you don't know. So you have to balance those things. Clearly, this global experiment of working from home, working remotely, is going to give us some trends for the future. how to better balance things, how to put also sustainability and environment as part of the decision making. Personally, I used to go to I live in DC. Personally, I used to go to New York almost every week. Now I will reconsider, why am I going to take a plane, waste energy for meetings that may have at home and may have from working from our local office here. So it's also a very clear setting for the future. And I think that we need to work with the communities, and it's an effort that we can only be successful if we take it together.
I'm sure many companies actually have had to reconsider and rethink what they've been doing in the past, and how you can actually adapt quite quickly as well. So we move over now to Engin. What have you been doing your end? How have you been adapting? And what are your thoughts on cocooning versus herd immunity as well?
Bei uns im Europäischen Parlament ist erstmal vor allem sehr wichtig gewesen, dass wir Abgeordneten, aber auch unsere Mitarbeiter nicht zum europäischen Sicherheitsrisiko werden. Denn das ist nun mal Realität hier. Wir kommen aus der kompletten Europäischen Union zusammen mit unseren Mitarbeitern, sind hier auf engstem Raum, in kleinen Büros, in kleinen Sälen, um politisch zu arbeiten. Und das führt natürlich auch zu einem gewissen Sicherheitsrisiko, wenn man dann wieder nach Hause in seine Nationen fährt. Und so haben wir oder hat die Konferenz der Präsidenten beschlossen, dass wir hier im Parlament erstmal Cocooning machen, um nicht als Abgeordnete und als Mitarbeiter sicherheitsgefährdend zu sein für die Europäer. Und überraschenderweise hat das enorm gut funktioniert. In der Krise die Fakten abzuarbeiten, funktioniert durchaus durch Telearbeit. Man hat eine klare Agenda von Problemen, die gelöst werden müssen. Das funktioniert per Telearbeit. Spannend ist aber der Prozess der politischen Arbeit. Und da ist es schon so zu sehen, dass man kompromissfähiger ist, wenn man sich scheinbar doch persönlich trifft. Und diese neue Arbeit, zu sagen, Probleme zu lösen durch eine Kompromissfähigkeit des Gegenübers, ob das auch in Telearbeit möglich sein wird, das wird sich in Zukunft herausstellen. Das kann ich jetzt abschließend noch nicht beurteilen. Aber auf jeden Fall ist es zu sehen, dass das Europäische Parlament schnell einsatzfähig war. Denn schon die erste Abstimmung, die wir dann alle von zu Hause aus gemacht haben, haben über 695 von 705 Europaabgeordneten auch teilgenommen. Das heißt, die Politik hat funktioniert, sie ist einsatzfähig gewesen im Cocooning, jedoch bezogen auf das, um die Pandemie zu lösen. Ob Politik in der Zukunft auch so funktioniert, ist schwer einzuschätzen. Ich glaube eher nicht.
Well, of course, thank you. Thank you. There's so much to learn as well, because I mean, this is the first time this has happened in many, many years. So everyone's trying to adjust and adapt to this new type of normal. And I'm going to be talking about a second wave and what we need to do to put in place in order to make sure that we were resilient for the future a little bit later on. But Harald, Kayser, which industries do you think have been dramatically affected or will be dramatically affected as a result of cocooning, and what sort of impact is that actually going to have on economically vulnerable groups such as youth and women as well? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so first of all, it's still very difficult to assess the full magnitude of the economic impact of the coronavirus. So economists are really struggling and revising their macroeconomic forecasts for the different sectors on a weekly basis. And everything is depending on how the scenarios will go on. So the economists they have ideas about a V scenario, a U scenario, or a L scenario. V scenario means strong and fast recovery after the shutdown. U scenario means it takes a little bit longer, probably till the fourth quarter of this calendar year. And L scenario means it stays as it is after the shutdown. All economies are affected very heavily in the Western as well as in the developing world. And we see an overall impact based on our macroeconomic forecast between 8 and 10%, depending on the V or U scenario. If we go into the different industries, then this is a very mixed picture. So we have industries which are more or less neutral. That's, for example, the consumer goods retail food industry. So they have even growth rates. Telecommunication, with all the technology what is now necessary, is doing quite well. If we go into the platforms, all the platform companies, so including Amazon and so on, are performing very well as they are independent from retail stores. Then there are other industries which are slightly affected. That's technology, software, healthcare, agriculture, where there are no huge impacts, however, some small ones. Then we see the financial sector, utilities, chemicals, negatively affected, but probably they will come back much faster if the lockdown disappears. And then we see industries which are very negatively affected, and that's especially entertainment and media. That's the whole service industry, so including also restaurants, entertainment, and so on. Then the non-food consumer goods and retail, everything around transportation, travel, hospitality, and automotive. And especially in Europe, automotive is one of our strongest industry, with a deep impact then also on the entire supplier landscape. And there's really the risk that also due to the missing consumer confidence, which we are currently feel, there will be a longer recession, and it will take some quite time that they will come back. And for other industry, especially then if we go into the travel industry, seeing that many things are working quite well by working remotely, there's the question mark whether we will fly again so much in the future, whether we have to travel to have one meeting, or whether we can set up more remote video conferences as we do it not right now. Normally we would be on a trade fair. And that will be interesting to see whether this has a dramatic shift in the future on some of these industries where the world will not be as it was before Corona. At the same time, and that's one of the biggest challenge in our world, that's sustainability and the climate impact. And the travel industry, of course, has a major influence on that. So therefore, also as companies are more and more keen to reduce their CO2 emission footprint in the world, that can help to achieve these kind of goals, at the same time saves travel time and commuting time. So that will be really interesting. You asked for especially for women and youth. So for women, I think it's they significantly suffer harder than men, for example, because on the one hand, they are quite often working in industries which are much more impacted, health industry, in retail. Therefore, they are faced with a higher risk of short-term working, health risks, and unemployment risks. At the same time, even if this might be a stereotype, but in reality that's the case, that women still bear a major portion of childcare, and therefore are affected on top of the remote working with homeschooling and all of that. That might be also a good chance to for men to change the role model. These kind of challenges are especially for women. And if we go to children, we see that the lockdown of schools and university will have a negative impact on their chances to find a workplace in the future. Inadequate schooling during the COVID time will have an impact on their entire life. So therefore, there is a higher risk of unemployment for youth. And if you see especially Europe, then we have in the southern part of Europe already a quite high unemployment rate for young people, which will now accelerate. So therefore, I think it's necessary to care about especially the young population, and that we do not come into this crisis situation where old against young are playing, that we find roles for both of them, on the one hand to protect the older one, but on the other hand to give the young one better chances to find their best place in society after the crisis.
It's going to be very interesting to see what the world's going to look like in a year's time, that's for sure. Thank you so much for your points on that, really interesting. Guillermo Miranda, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the economically vulnerable groups like the youth and women as well, and the impact of cocooning and the situation at the moment as well. What's your take on that?
Yes, look, I think that the first thing that we have to reflect is that this pandemic has shown us very clearly in our face the fragility of our society and how vulnerable we are very immediately about things that we assume for granted. Taking a plane and going to a meeting in London was a no-brainer. You need to do it, you just go pass customs, have your meeting, come back. Or assuming that you can have the same vacation that you have every year. You call, you book, you go. So it shows us the fragility of our society and the assumptions that we have made over time. So I think that the angle that we need to reflect is about how we need to rethink the experiences. We have assumed a world where consumerism was high in the agenda, and we put a prime on face-to-face. We assume that going on vacation to the Maldives, if you live in California, is business as usual. Why? You take a plane and you spend 1 week in the Maldives. So I think that rethinking experiences is going to be central. And as Harald showed us the different impact in industries, I think the industries, different industries, will need to rethink the experiences. There is going to be a premium to the digital capabilities of industries. As much as you can have the ability to have experiences that happen apart from face-to-face mandatory, that will be important. You have seen the way that has impacted retail, the retail sector. Some firms have a much better digital experience. We're ahead. And now they are having results that are less affected to the very traditional players that were anchors in a mall that depends on people walking through for the purchase decisions. So digital at the core. We are going to see also an emergence of touchless options, whether this is because the immediate effect of restarting the economy, the experience in the airport, the experience in a train, the experience walking in places, touchless options, technologies are going to really have a premium and evolve into new normalities, new things that we will assume on this rethinking the experiences. And then in terms of reassessing priorities in the marketplace, this is going to be also a very important factor. What the companies are going to prioritize, how this crisis has put core and center the ability to reduce your carbon footprint, because not necessarily you need to do exactly what you were doing with a little of the inertia of these assumptions of no fragility. We are the kings of the world. We can do whatever we want. So I think that reassessment of priorities and having sustainability more close to what we do is very important. In terms of the communities that have been more affected, clearly there is a difference between how this affects people that has a job that can be completely remote. We work from home, we continue to have our meetings. There is a lot of retail jobs. If I work in a store, I cannot do that from home because there are clients that come. There is also an assumption on education. I think one of the largest experiments that we are seeing with this pandemic is the massive switch to remote learning, to the fanatics of digital, like we in IBM. We will never dream on this experiment that every organization needs to flip flip their learning and education into a remote environment in a matter of weeks. So we are learning tricks that then we will not abandon when the new reality comes. Okay? So women definitely, because of social factors, have been more affected. There is still a strong stereotype of who is responsible for what, okay? And that has an effect. Whether you are in a sector that has more women participation, like hospitality, for instance, that is directly affected, or because you are in a white-collar job, but at home there is an assumption that you will do more things. Who is preparing dinner? Who is doing lunch? So I think that also has put in perspective some rules that were not revisited for quite some time. And our mission as society is to be sure that the trends that are affecting these groups, young adults, children, we need to work on reverting that. We need to work on what is the countermeasure. Yes, we know they have been affected. Now, what is the investment that we need to do? We have seen in several countries a massive response in terms of economic packages. But many of these economic packages have been conceived on the traditional cash flow availability mindset of economists. Instead of said, oh, now is the time to change some of priorities. Let's put more here than there. So many things, maybe moving parts, but clearly, if you see this in perspective over the years, 2020 will be known as the year of the pandemic, but the year that we learn how to live differently.
Well, you never know. There might be a huge wave of new roles in career or jobs. I remember reading an article saying, in 50 years' time, half the jobs that we have now are going to be very different to sort of 50 years' time. Maybe this is a chance to sort of fast forward that.
This is an acceleration of all these trends, Laura, very clearly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the digital experience, Engin, remote work through digital platforms. Do you feel that companies have been given a sort of glimpse into the future sort of by fast forwarding into this future digital workplace? And do you think this might be an ongoing theme, regardless of whether we've got to physically go back into the office?
Also ich schaue auf jeden Fall positiv in die Zukunft. Das zeigt mir aber auch, das, was wir in den letzten 2,5 bis 3 Monaten geschafft haben, ist immens. Auch die Solidarität, die weltweit herrscht, ist immens. Und die Transformation der Wirtschaft ist jetzt ein sehr spannender Prozess dabei. Wir hatten es eben angesprochen, wie sieht der stationäre Handel der Zukunft aus? Der Unternehmer, der Verkäufer von Produkten hatte sich daran gewöhnt, dass der Kunde in einem Pkw, meist allein fahrend, ins Geschäft fährt, dort sich seine Winterjacke kauft oder auch nicht und wieder nach Hause fährt. Jetzt hat der Konsument, der Kunde, Angst davor zu konsumieren. Er hat Angst davor, in Läden zu gehen. Vielleicht sind auch die Mund-Nasen-Masken ein Hemmnis dafür. Und der Kunde bestellt im Internet. Und das Spannende wird sein, halt es zu schaffen, dass die Marktplätze noch bestehen bleiben. Aber auch nicht nur die Marktplätze im Netz, sondern auch draußen im stationären Handel. Denn die Wirtschaft dient ja dem Menschen. Die Wirtschaft spiegelt ja die Bedürfnispyramide der Konsumenten ab. Und ich glaube, es ist einem Konsumenten sehr wichtig, nicht nur beliefert zu werden von einem Warenhaus, sondern auch persönlich zu beraten. Und da möchte ich jetzt ein Fallbeispiel in Deutschland bringen. Es ist ja so bei uns in Deutschland, wir haben glücklicherweise keine Liberalisierung unserer Apotheken. Das heißt, ein Apotheker muss stationär sein und muss vorhanden sein, auch in der Apotheke. Und viele Kunden konnten während der Ausgangssperre nicht mehr in die Apotheken gehen. Und vielerorts haben Apotheker über die Digitalisierung durch den Umbau ihres Geschäftsbetriebes gesagt, draußen stehen ja sehr viele Taxis. Und ist es eine Möglichkeit als Apotheker, diese Ressource Taxi, die er jetzt auch nicht mehr fährt, zu beauftragen, die Medikamente aus der Apotheke zum Patienten zu bringen. Und das ist was, wo ich gesagt habe, warum gab es das vorher nicht? Also unsere Innenstädte sind ja nicht nur voll mit Taxis, sondern vor allem auch mit Lieferdiensten. Und warum können wir diese bestehende Ressource Taxi nicht in der Zukunft auch weiter nutzen für Lieferdienste in der Stadt, wenn sie gerade keinen Kunden von A nach B fahren? Und da sehen wir, dass durch diesen massiven Druck der Pandemie bestehende Ressourcen, die auch die Umwelt schädigen, aber auch vorhanden sind und Geld kosten, auf einmal durch digitale Plattformen, Apotheker ist vernetzt über eine Software mit einem Taxiunternehmen, das nutzt. Und das ist das, wo die Zukunft auch hingehen wird. Wir werden durch die Digitalisierung die Ressourcen effizienter nutzen. Und die Politik, das ist dann meine Aufgabe, muss die Rahmenbedingungen schaffen, dass ein Klima entsteht, dass Unternehmer, die nicht 20, nicht 30 sind, sondern 55, 65 sind, ein Klima entsteht, dass die sich trauen, auch diese Ressourcen wahrzunehmen. Und das muss natürlich auch begünstigt werden durch Wirtschaftspolitik, dass vorhandene Ressourcen besser genutzt werden. Jedoch sage ich das ganz klar, ich als Gesellschaftsmodell stelle ich mir nicht vor, dass wir Menschen nur noch zu Hause sitzen und von zu Hause aus arbeiten und konsumieren. Das ist nicht die Art von Gesellschaftspolitik, die ich präferiere, aber auch die meine Wähler mir ganz klar deutlich sagen. Und wir sehen ja auch, dass wir jetzt das, was wir aus der Pandemie gelernt haben, dass das komplette Cocooning auch so in der Art nicht notwendig ist, sondern dass auch eine gewisse Lockerung der Gesellschaft möglich ist. Und wir sehen das zumindest in Europa, dass die Fallzahlen ständig runtergehen, obwohl die Menschen wieder unterwegs sind. Dennoch gilt es jetzt, dieses Fallbeispiel aus der Apotheke auch vernünftig zu nutzen und nicht zu alten Mustern zurückzukehren.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Engin. Some great insights there. Thank you very much. Just very quickly, we've only got 5 more minutes left, but I've got a question for each of you left. So if we could do these relatively swiftly, that would be great. Just a couple of minutes each for your last final questions. And then I'll be asking you to do a wrap up right at the end of some of the key sort of highlights. So just very, very quickly. Harald, Kayser, with economy slowly opening back up and COVID-19 restrictions easing, what other options do you think we're going to need in order to reignite our economies then? What are we going to need to kickstart the economy again, in your view?
Yeah, so first of all, I think the stimulus programs, which are currently driven by many governments across the globe, are the right answer. But as Guillermo said, the question is whether we make the stimulus program available for everything and everywhere, or whether we concentrate on those areas which have to be accelerated. And none of the trends, what we have discussed here in our group, is really new, but the pandemic crisis accelerate all of that. And therefore, I think we should concentrate, and that was also a topic before regarding digital upskilling, because to use the technology, you need people who can work with that. And there's currently, especially in the Western world, a gap between the skills gap of our people and workforce in comparison what is expected. And digital upskilling is one of the #1 elements. And digital upskilling can also happen remotely. And we call it new work, new skills. Also with a different leadership, with a different workforce transformation. And these are very strategic investments which have to be done by companies, but also by the society to set up digital learning platforms, to come up with a much deeper experience around digitalization in universities and schools. And I think that's something which can really help them to accelerate also the productivity side of technology after the COVID-19 crisis. And we as PwC are really investing quite a lot in our workforce, and we see that clients do the same, and the stimulus programs run by government should go in the same direction.
Guillermo, do you feel that cocooning has kept the economy afloat so far? What's your take on that?
Definitely not. I think that was a temporary measure that you have to do in order to support and sustain the healthcare systems. That was the right decision, but it clearly affected the economy. So we need to work on the confidence of the consumer in this new reality, and how these new experiences will continue to be the way forward. Definitely, there is a clear space on skills, digital skills, how to operate in this new economy. And clearly, this crisis has shown up the difference and the gaps. And we should not afford a world where you have the haves and the have-nots and amplify the digital divide. We need to work on that. And digitalization, platforms, the touchless technologies, all of that will be core and center on how we reassess this consumer confidence to emerge from this crisis in a different way. We need also to rethink the rules about the labor market. We have seen extreme rigidity and extreme flexibility. So sometimes there is a way to reimagine some of these things and how to put resources from government in the right places. It will require a lot of innovation, creativity, but I think that the looking forward is always optimistic.
Well, good that there's a bit of a positivity coming out there, of course. Engin, a final question for you. How do you think companies have been able to leverage cross-sector solutions with working with other companies? And tell us about the importance of collaboration over this very challenging time as well.
Ich hatte ja eben schon ein Beispiel diesbezüglich genannt mit dem Apotheker. Branchenübergreifend trifft der Apotheker auf den Taxifahrer, vorher noch nie was zusammen zu tun gehabt miteinander. Das ist ein Fallbeispiel branchenübergreifend. Ein anderes Beispiel ist, da bin ich der festen Überzeugung auch, dass alle Branchen und auch Menschen keine Angst mehr vor Technologie haben dürfen. Technologie ist nichts Böses und ist nicht gegen die Menschen, sondern ist ein Werkzeug von uns, welches wir nutzen können, um uns das Leben zu erleichtern. Und wenn die Hightech-Firmen und die Programmierer was Gutes tun wollen und branchenübergreifend die Wirtschaft wieder ankurbeln möchten und auch Vertrauen der Konsumenten erzeugen möchten, dann brauchen wir, ich will es mal sagen, eine sogenannte Corona-App, die branchenübergreifend wird, Vertrauen schafft und die Konsumenten wieder rausgehen, weil sie nicht mehr Angst haben, dass es zu einer neuen Pandemie kommt oder einer zweiten oder dritten Welle. Also die Technologie muss jetzt wirken und diese Branchen vernetzen, und das bedarf unglaublich viel an Bildung. Aber da wir nur 5 Minuten haben, das mir ein wirklich wichtiges Thema ist, Sie hatten vorhin noch das Thema Kinder und Frauen angesprochen. Kinder brauchen Kinder und nicht nur ihre Eltern. Und zur sozialen Bindung ist es ganz wichtig, dass wir diesen Kindern die Freiheit wiedergeben. Und dazu hilft auch so eine App zum Beispiel. Und deswegen ist es wichtig, dass wir den Menschen in Europa die Freiheit wiedergeben. Und zum Thema Frauen möchte ich noch sagen, diese Pandemie hat uns ganz klar gezeigt, dass gerade die Frauen wieder die größte Last zu tragen hatten, was ich wirklich schrecklich finde. Und das ist nicht nur, in Anführungszeichen, nur zu Hause im Haushalt, sondern auch in den Pflegeberufen. Und auch da ist es so, dass ich der festen Überzeugung bin, dass der Einsatz in den Pflegeberufen von Robotern, von Techniken sozusagen die Arbeitserleichterung schaffen, und sei es nur das schwere Heben. Das heißt, wir müssen in die Zukunft investieren, und das heißt für mich in Technologie investieren.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Sadly, we have run out of time, but just before we wrap up, I'd actually like you all to wrap up with just maybe a sentence or a couple of minutes on some of the key takeaways you'd like our viewers to go away with, and also maybe how we can build a more sustainable and resilient future as well. Harald, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I'm optimistic regarding the future. So this virus will disappear, or we will have a vaccine so we do not have to deal with that forever. But there might be another virus, so you never can be sure. And therefore, I think it's important to look back into the crisis and see the opportunities out of the crisis. And as summary, what we just said is the technology upskilling of our entire society, usage of technology in order to work more remotely, taking the opportunity of new industries, new platforms, how to change the sales channel. And from a people perspective, yeah, be more balanced, have more time at home together with your family, share the different tasks at home with your wife and children in order to rebalance the responsibilities there. And as society overall, and Engin mentioned that before, I think there's a lot of solidarity across the world happening with this virus, and we should try to keep this solidarity and the well-being of our next in mind, also in times where there's no virus.
Thank you, Harald. Guillermo, what are your key takeaways?
I think that this is the time for companies to really lead with values. What is the purpose of a company in society? How we put in perspective that role, how we have to be responsible beyond the bottom line or the direct investors, with a community, with a set of employees, with a set of consumers of our products. So in IBM, we are very proud of what we are doing. We have these programs on reinventing education, P-Tech, the new model of high school with an associate degree. We have a platform for upskilling and reskilling. And I think that the next frontier is how we better collaborate and how we companies put first the goal and not our brand name. Sometimes I work in this sector, and before we decide how to work together, we are already positioning which brand goes first. So this is the time to show that companies have a role in society that goes beyond generating profits.
Thanks very much. Engin, your final key messages and how we can build a more resilient future as well.
Also diese schreckliche Krise hat uns gezeigt, dass Europa nicht nur auf dem Papier existiert, sondern Europa auch in den Herzen der Menschen existiert. Wir haben diese Krise unbeschadet überstanden, auch wenn leider viele Menschen verstorben sind. Aber Europa ist zusammengerückt und nicht auseinandergerückt. Und wir haben alles versucht in der Europäischen Union, diese Krise so zu bewältigen, um die Menschen, und darum geht es, so viel Freiheit wie möglich darzustellen. Denn die Aufgabe der Politik ist es, den Menschen die Freiheit zu geben, sie aufzuklären über gute Bildung, damit sie ihr Leben gestalten können. Und das haben wir geschafft. Und ich bin der festen Überzeugung, wie lange auch immer dieser Virus uns bedrohen wird, wird es so sein, dass es nicht mehr schlimmer wird, als es schon war. Denn jetzt wissen wir mehr über diesen Feind als vorher, und jetzt gilt dieses Wissen zu verarbeiten und das Bestmögliche aus der Situation zu machen und den Menschen wieder mehr Freiheit einzuräumen.
Well, thank you so much to each of you for joining us and taking the time out of your very busy schedules, and also for sharing your expert opinions so openly with us here today. 3 very impressive leadership perspectives there on cocooning versus herd immunity and working through the pandemic. If any of our viewers would like to continue the conversation, please do head over to our social media pages, where you can find us under @GMIS Summit, and also feel free to email us as well. Please do keep a lookout for the next GMIS session in this digital series, with a focus on globalization towards sustainable and inclusive global value chains. Thank you very much.